Before we get to Trey, let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
The decisions have to be made in the case of Russia by Putin alone. I think we've made some progress. We've gotten closer, but we're still not there. We're still not close enough. But that could change. I hope it changes.
5 hours later, a no peace deal with Vladimir Putin. Not surprising to me. Ukraine says the door is not closed. I guess that is good. They're doing everything possible. Why I think we have to turn up the heat for Vladimir Putin to truly play ball.
Number 2.
Democrats picked their own candidate. They had 3 state representatives running. They picked the liberal wingnut. That's the problem Democrats face in primaries all over the country in 2026, that they may nominate a left-wing nut who can't win the general.
Yep, that is a Republican operative. Talking on CNN, special election win for the GOP in Tennessee, but far from the route it should have been. It's a district that Donald Trump won by 24 points. Why both sides have a lot to work on after this election. I'll go over the details, and we'll talk about the affordability agenda.
Number 1.
This president is dead serious about making certain that poison that is coming in and killing us, he's conducting a comprehensive campaign, the ships, the airplanes, and the rest of it. The president has a lot of options. Maduro is much aware of what those options are.
And Maduro plans on outlasting Trump. He says he's going to push Trump's patience. Why I think that does not work, and the price the administration will pay if he stays. And joining us now is Trey Yingst. Hey, Trey, Fox News' chief foreign correspondent. He is now taking a break, I guess, from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem to come home. You know, he's the author of Black Saturday, a great Christmas gift, by the way, an unfiltered account of the October 7th attack on Israel and the war on Gaza. Trey, welcome back.
Thanks, Brian.
All right. First off, are you surprised after 5 hours? Number one, what is your takeaway from the readouts or what we're hearing about the 5-hour meeting between Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, the American delegation, countered by Vladimir Putin himself, as well as his negotiators? What's your takeaway?
Look, it's been an interesting 72 hours. This is shuttle diplomacy at the highest level. We saw over the weekend on Sunday in Florida a Ukrainian delegation in the United States led by President Zelensky's national security advisor, Rustem Umerov. And he was meeting directly with President Trump's special envoys, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. This is an indication they're getting into the small details of this broader American proposed peace plan that could end the war between Russia and Ukraine. Almost immediately, you saw Kushner and Witkoff fly to Moscow to meet with Russian President Putin to get the Russian take on where things stand in these negotiations. The issue here is that as part of this broader plan that started out at 28 points, and it's now been, according to reports, whittled down to 19 points, it would require the Ukrainians to give up nearly the entirety of the eastern Donbass region that they've been fighting over for the past 3.5 years. And it's going to be a tough pill to swallow for the Ukrainian people who have spent all of this time under fire each and every day amid Russian attacks that continue as we speak.
I mean, they're losing 7,000 a month, and they say they're winning. I'm talking about the Russians.
That's the real sort of thing that's hard to comprehend here, I think, for the broader global audience. There are thousands of soldiers being killed and wounded each month in eastern Ukraine. It's been described by some analysts as a meat grinder for the Russians, who are basically just sending these soldiers to the front line, knowing that they'll be killed by Ukrainian artillery. And oftentimes there are months that go by and the Russians are only gaining a few hundred feet of territory. And it gives you a sense of sort of how pointless this ground invasion really is.
So I guess prior to the meeting, Vladimir Putin was asked a question. I guess he had an investors meeting before that. Who would want to invest in Russia? But he says, if Europe suddenly wants to wage a war with us and starts it, we are ready to fight right away. He's upset that the Europeans blew up the 28-point deal and are very critical of it and feel it's too pro-Russian. And he's threatening Europe. But he's always threatening Europe. He was doing that from day one. You better not arm Ukrainians. You better not give them HIMARS. You better not give them tanks. And we're finding out that you can walk right through a lot of his threats.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I talked about this a lot throughout the course of the war while we were reporting on the ground in Ukraine. And it became a situation like the boy who cried wolf. The Russians would say if the Americans provide the Javelin anti-tank missiles, they're going to respond with significant action against Washington that could also threaten Europe. They said the same thing whenever they gave artillery units for the East and the air defense systems and these medium-range to long-range missiles. The reality on the ground is that the Russians often make these broad threats, but they rarely follow through on the threats because they understand that Europe is actually quite unified right now as it relates to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, understanding that it's now on their doorstep. And also they are strengthening NATO alliances, understanding that the Russians have actually launched drones that have entered NATO airspace and had to be shot down.
So when we look at the scandal that Zelensky's lost to Yermak, who is the chief negotiator and has been with him every step of the way, he was his confidant when he was running for election. Do you think that Zelensky's been hurt severely by this? I know we're not in day-to-day Ukrainian politics. How damaged is he?
It's a very difficult situation for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Andrei Yermak, his former chief of staff, you could describe him as, was with him every single minute of the day. When we traveled with President Zelensky last year to the Eastern Front lines on a night train that was classified until we returned safely to Kyiv, Yermak was there. When we would go to meet with President Zelensky at the presidential palace in Kyiv, Yermak was there. When I was in Ukraine in September of this year, I hosted a few panels. Yermak was on one of those panels. He was the person that people looked to basically give a sense of what the presidential office was going through and what the country needed from allies across the region and across the world. Not having him there is certainly a disadvantage for Zelensky, but Zelensky also understands he has to distance himself from any sort of corruption scandals because this is something that the Ukrainians take a lot of heat for. It is a country that is based often on corruption.
But Trey, Yermak knows how hard a slog it is for the president to get aid to Ukraine. He knows how political it has been. If Yermak cared about the outcome of this war, why would he put $1 at risk, knowing that Americans who are critical of this mission say, well, Ukraine is riddled with corruption, don't throw money into that pit. And others are saying they're fighting for freedom and they're a democracy, you have to support it as imperfect as they are. How could he be part of the problem? I mean, how could more people misread him? Right? But he doesn't take just like 1 million. This is like tens of millions of dollars, they're saying.
You make a great point. And look, it's a systematic issue in Ukraine. And it was an issue before the full-scale invasion in February of 2022. But it's remarkable how many top officials Zelensky has had to let go even in recent months. And we're talking about minister level people who were directly involved in corruption, knowing that ultimately it would come out because there is accountability demanded when it comes to foreign funding amid a war like this. So it's hard to wrap your mind around how this corruption scandal could take place without top leadership understanding how bad it was, or at least having some idea that it was going on.
All right. Let's talk over where the gig you just left, and that is seeing how long the ceasefire is going to last and after the hostage has been released. I couldn't believe in reading about the extensive warehouse that's been converted to almost a headquarters for Gaza, for the rebuild, for making sure phase 1 turns into phase 2. What could you tell me about the strength of Hamas and how strong the ceasefire is holding?
So the ceasefire is definitely holding quite strong. And when we look at President Trump's 20-point peace plan, it's being implemented step by step. Right now, we're in between phase 1 and phase 2 of the agreement. There are still the bodies of 2 hostages that have to be released by Hamas to complete phase 1. And the planning is already underway for phase 2 that will include an international stabilization force going into Gaza and ultimately a technocratic government ruling parts of the Gaza Strip that are demilitarized from Hamas control. Right now, just under 50% of Gaza is still controlled by Hamas completely. What's changed is part of the Trump administration peace plan ushered in what is called the CMCC. And this is, as you described, this warehouse that was converted to an American base in southern Israel. And just a few weeks ago, I visited this warehouse, and it was quite impressive inside to see U.S. Central Command operating on the ground in Israel. When you walk in, it looks like they've taken AstroTurf from a football field and laid it on the ground of this warehouse. And you look up and you see these massive screens, and they have maps on them, real-time live stream video, and also a variety of notification lines so that the Americans are able to lead not only the aid distribution now inside Gaza, but also the coordination of possible ceasefire violations to ensure that they don't unravel and destroy President Trump's peace plan. And so the coordination is really at the highest level, but it's not just the Americans. Of course, you have an Israeli presence there, but you also have dozens of other countries that have representatives there on the ground, and we could see them in this warehouse. You look at the patches on their arms, from Belgium to France to Italy to other countries that are involved in this process. So systematically, the peace plan is moving forward. There will be challenges ahead. It will not just unfold as the president wants it to, But given the fact that he was able to take these high-level negotiators, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, to Egypt before this ultimately got underway, describe what he wanted to see and what the peace plan needed to look like, and then work backwards, he's actually able to create a scenario where there are some ceasefire violations, but across the board, this ceasefire is holding.
Yeah, to get to the next phase, you need an international force to take over. I heard Indonesia right away said, count me in. But number one, what have you heard about putting that force together? I heard about the training in Jordan of Palestinians who would be a part of it. Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are conversations about which countries will be involved in any sort of international stabilization force. And as you mentioned, Indonesia raised their hand saying they would be willing. The Israelis were open to that. They were not open to Turkey being involved because they're concerned about Turkish influence in the region. One interesting thing that we saw when we visited this American base in southern Israel is that they already have diagrams that are built out about a Palestinian police force training program. And so they understand that if you demilitarize an area, you can't just leave it without a police force. You can't leave it without any sort of guidelines to a civil society if you want to usher in a new stable period that is de-radicalized and ultimately won't pose a threat to neighboring Israel. And so it appears that as part of this plan, they're going to teach moderate Palestinians in Gaza how to police their own people with the oversight of the Americans to ensure that they don't support Hamas or put any sort of small arms weapons that they may be given into the hands of a terrorist organization.
And obviously phase two, the international force and also Hamas to lay down their weapons, decommission their weapons. That's a huge haul.
It's huge. And that is really one of the roadblocks ahead. The reality is Hamas is still a terrorist organization and they are unwilling to go peacefully. And so there is a possibility that the war resumes, that Israel's ground invasion pushes forward inside Gaza. The Trump administration is going to do what they can to try and encourage Hamas and the leadership that does remain inside Gaza to actually encourage the fighters and the terrorists to lay down their weapons, understanding that there is basically a binary choice here. You can either choose to lay down your weapons or the war will resume. And Israel has said they will basically forcefully remove Hamas from power.
Only they won't have to worry about hostages. This time it'll be all in. Number two is, can you rebuild a part of Gaza that Hamas is not in, as Jared Kushner talked about? It's possible?
Yeah, and there are reports actually that there are pockets of southern Gaza that are under Israeli control, that they're already starting to clear rubble and unexploded ordnances with an understanding that you still have 2 million Palestinian civilians in Gaza, and they're going to need a place to live in the future of the enclave that has been proposed as part of this peace plan. And so this is going to take decades to do, to get this rubble out of Gaza and to remove all of the unexploded bombs and things like this. And so they're already starting to work on this, to build areas that would have new housing and give people an opportunity to say, hey, I'm committed to a de-radicalized Gaza, a moderate approach to the Palestinian state, and I'd be willing to ultimately move into this area that would still be under Palestinian control, but not under Hamas control.
And lastly, on the West Bank, what's the state of things now? I understand the Israelis are targets when they go through there, and there's disputes on who's going to control what. The president's made it clear. He says, I do not want to hear about you and annex the West Bank. I know there's people on the extreme right that say, yes, we are. That will not fly with this administration.
Absolutely. President Trump's been very clear he is not supportive of West Bank annexation because he wants the peace plan to hold. And there could be no peace plan between the Israelis and Palestinians if the Israelis are chipping away at Palestinian territory. And so it's a very smart move from President Trump to basically draw a red line for the Israelis to say there will be no further expansion as this deal is moving forward. Now, the question is, does that change in the future? The reality is the Israelis are still operating in pockets of the West Bank that are under the Palestinian Authority control, but that the Palestinian Authority has actually lost control over in practice. Hamas runs certain areas of the West Bank, whether it be Jenin or Tulkarem or even parts of Nablus. And the Israelis have gone in and they've actually captured and killed terrorists that are on their wanted list. And for the first time in years, the Israelis and the Central Command of Israel, you could call it, is saying that they have caught everyone on their list. There's no outstanding terrorists that they're looking for. And a lot of this has to do with a man named Avi Bluth, who is the commander of the Central Forces in Israel. And he has made a concerted effort to do two things. One, to go after these wanted men in the West Bank from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. But two, actually call out some of the settler violence that is taking place in the West Bank that has destabilized the internal Israeli political situation.
All right, Trey Yingst, thanks so much. Doing an incredible job overseas. It's nice to see you home, even though you're just one bureau away. Fox News' finest. Trey, thanks so much.
Thanks, Kilmeade.
In every election that's been on the ballot this year in 2025, Democrats have overperformed in red districts, in blue districts, in purple districts, all throughout this country. In fact, last November's elections were the most historic off-year elections for the Democratic Party in our party's history. And we are overperforming at an average pace of about 16 percentage points. And you're seeing that in this district tonight. It's a plus 22% district. The Republicans have spent over $4 million trying to win a district they should have won handedly.
Yeah, but they outspent the Republicans because I guess he thought it was okay to do that. Meanwhile, Ken Martin had to take out lines of credit in order to get his win in New Jersey and Virginia just a month ago. And then he spent more money here. He's in charge of the DNC, which is very fractured. They got this huge socialist wing. You just saw this candidate, big-time socialist. You saw what happened in New York City. You saw what almost happened with the socialists against a more traditional, but a terrible candidate as mayor of Minneapolis, Epps, Fry. And then you have the one that won in Seattle. They have a fractured party, but they did everything he said is correct. They did do better than anyone thought. Maybe Congressman David Kustoff was not surprised. He's in the 8th district over in Tennessee and joins us now. Congressman, what is your takeaway from the result last night?
Brian, good morning. A win's a win. We like winning, and if the Democrats are okay with moral victories, then let them have moral victories. I will say, with all that money that they pumped into the Tennessee 7th Congressional District yesterday and through this campaign, that's less money that they'll have for other elections. And I don't know if you're the chairman of the DNC or the DCCC or whoever is raising money for these elections. How do you keep going back to your donors with moral victories and claim any type of success? I think what I would encourage the DNC to continue to run these far left progressive candidates in these ruby red districts, and they can claim every moral victory they want. They won't be successful. I think that these special elections, we've seen these in off years, whether Trump is president or Biden is president or whoever's president, and generally the party in power doesn't get the same percentages they do in a regularly scheduled November election. So I'm happy that the Democrats are proclaiming victory when they lose by 9 points. But the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, Mat Van Epps is going to be called congressman.
Right. I know it's off year and the party not in power usually not as motivated. But the fact that Trump and Green won by over 20 points and you win by 9 against a candidate that doesn't like Nashville. I mean, literally, she said she doesn't like Nashville. In a state, she has made it clear she doesn't like cops. Protests against ICE on camera, was for burning down police stations, thinks men can have babies. This was the worst candidate in terms of issues that they could have put forward. And she still got within 9. If I made you an analyst, not a congressman, would you say that Republicans there's a takeaway here?
Well, I think there are a number of takeaways. One is I will note that when they rank these districts, like mine is what they call an R plus 21 or plus 22. I believe the 7th Congressional District technically is an R plus 10 or R plus 11, and he won by 9 points. I will also point out that you accurately described her profile. That is everything that she said in the past, but when she campaigned for this election, she didn't campaign that way. She tried to campaign more towards the center, and that's smart. I mean, she can't erase her history and what she's done on social media, and we saw the word salad of interviews when she was confronted with some of those past comments about burning down police stations and whatnot, and she couldn't answer. But she didn't campaign that way. I will say I think the bigger issue for Republicans is there is a specific type of Trump voter, and they turn out when Trump is on the ballot in 2016 and 2020 and 2024. We've always got our issues, but we won't have Trump after last year's election. And so to me, Republicans, we've got to start thinking about that for 2026 and 2028. That's what's going to be different.
Congressman, I will give you that. But I think that Trump, and I don't think he's shy about this, I think starting in the new year, he's got to pretend like he's on the ballot. And I think it's a great idea that you guys had of having your own mini convention, maybe in the summer again, to gain momentum and tell people what's at stake, because the Democrats only want to gum up the gears in your last 2 years. And it'll kind of, when you guys are in the minority, you're going to have mass retirements on top of that. So Trump can make it appear like he's on the ballot because his legacy really is. Do you expect him to be out there?
I expect President Trump to campaign as fiercely as he always does in the midterm elections, and realize we don't want to be in the minority. As a majority maker, we have done some really good things in the first 11 months of the year. I think the one big beautiful bill, we're going to start seeing the benefits of that next year, and that does address issues like affordability. Donald Trump doesn't want us to be in the minority, because if we're in the minority in the House,
nonstop lawsuits,
lawsuits,
investigations,
oversight hearings, impeachment,
yeah,
and it'll completely detract from his final 2 years as president. So Donald Trump is going to be absolutely committed, for all the right reasons, to making sure that we keep our majority in the House and in the Senate and gain to those majorities.
Congressman Kustoff, our guest, he's with Tennessee's 8th District. So, Congressman, where do you stand on the subsidies in Obamacare? Now, on its face, of course, you wouldn't be for it. But there's a lot of good people. Many people who voted for President Trump are not going to be able to afford their health care payments. So what's a legitimate how could Republicans keep to their values, but yet not leave a lot of people out to dry?
Well, it's complicated, and we know that they really got increased big time during the Biden years, during COVID, and there are people who are receiving those at income levels who shouldn't be receiving it. I guess my issue is that we're so close to the deadline. We're weeks away, and people are opening up their premium notices, and they've gone up significantly. So I don't think we need to address the issue. We need to find a solution, and something that 218 members of the House can be happy with, and 60 members of the Senate. And it should be something. Obviously, we've got about 3 more weeks of voting. People need answers. They need solutions. Frankly, this government shutdown that the Democrats forced on us meant that for 43 days where we didn't vote, that was not helpful. Whether that was part of their plan, who knows? But we've got an obligation to all of our constituents, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. We've got to find.
So, are you working across the aisle anywhere, or is that you leaving that to leadership?
No, we're all a part of it, and we all weigh in with what we think is viable. I mean, you've got the issue that I just mentioned, Brian. You've also got the government's fiscal problem.
I know,
which is significant, and so whatever we come up with, we collectively, it's not going to make everybody happy, but if we can find a short-term solution to work on a longer-term problem, which frankly Congress and different presidents have been working on for a long time. There's not going to be a magic answer, but let's do something in the short term to try to give some people some relief.
All right, so you would really want to see them do something. The president does. I think there's also but a large faction of your conservative community that don't want to do anything because Obamacare failed. Why bail them out? But they don't understand this. You're putting people in the line of fire. If there's something, you can work on a bipartisan plan together, because no partisan plan, no matter how brilliant, is ever going to go last an election. So you guys, after this is done, should probably work on something together, don't you think?
It needs to be a together solution, but it also has to be led by the White House. I mean, we've seen when the president gets engaged, and he's engaged a lot. I mean, as you know, he is talking to Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, multiple times per day, and talking to all of us. He's going to have to be involved, and he's going to have to lend his leadership.
I think he will, though. But if it's just the Trump deal, some people just will zone out on it. Hopefully, it's maybe working with some people on the other side. Congressman David Kustoff, thanks so much.
The votes are still coming in, but we overperformed in places we needed to, and we lost less in places we needed to. So I think it's a testament to the strength of the momentum of our campaign and what we built. The deck was stacked against us, especially in the deep red South, and we've narrowed the margin. And for me, that is a celebration worth having.
Okay, you could have that celebration, but you did lose by 9 points. Aftyn Behn on CNN talking about that she did get closer. Yes, she did not lose by 20, but she's one of the most left-wing candidates you could draw up. And the Republican Mat Van Epps is a dream candidate. He's got a military background, special operations, went to West Point, successful in business, endorsed by President Trump. But yet there's a alarming, Republicans should learn from this. The fact that it was more of a struggle and you had to spend that much money and the Democrats saw an opening, I think is a warning sign for the midterms. But what does Lydia Moynihan think? New York Post financial correspondent, host of NY Next, a podcast providing indispensable reporting on people, places, and policies shaping New York. Lydia, welcome.
I'm so glad to be here with you.
I know. And New York, sometimes you do New York, New York is a national story. I mean, 90% of the time, especially when it comes to finance.
Well, and now when it comes to Mamdani, I kind of feel like the city is going to be a bellwether for many of the other elections that we're seeing in the country. And it's interesting, even last night, the candidate they ran in Tennessee was more in the vein of Mamdani, where she wanted to defund the police and had fantasized about police stations burning down. And it's interesting to see.
Doesn't like country music.
And that. Yeah. And that, it really comes down to country music. But hey, actually, country music typically has a lot of more conservative values. So it's not just a genre. It also, I think, speaks to the sort of values of the South as well.
So what do you think that Republicans should take from this, if anything? What do you think they should learn from this?
Well,
that they won by 9, not 20, or some people say that's fine. Karl Rove was just on. He said that's not a big deal.
It's still a victory, and so that's certainly encouraging. But I think this is a good wake-up call for Republicans because this is a very deep red state. They should be winning by the kind of margins that Trump won by. And I think people get very complacent in those districts, and they think, oh, these are just Republican voters. We can just rely on them. But Republicans are typically low propensity voters. And what's interesting is the Republican sort of coalition has been realigned. Now we're seeing more working class people become Republicans, voting for Republicans. Those are lower propensity voters. So Republicans need to make sure that they really get those folks to turn out and vote. And they need to figure out how to get people to turn out and vote when Trump isn't on the ballot, right? He campaigns like hell. He gets people to turn out. He reaches them, uses the kind of messaging that they want to hear, and he works really hard. He's doing a bazillion rallies a day when he's running for office.
Right, and I think he's got to handle it like he's running for office starting in January. He really does. He's got to pick his spots, I know, but he's proven he could take the Oval Office anywhere. I mean, wherever he is, that's where the game is. So he doesn't need to be in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Mar-a-Lago obviously had the delegation there this weekend for hours talking about Ukraine and Russia peace. So Lydia, from the financial perspective, when people say you have to talk about affordability, the Democrats' way of talking about affordability is raising taxes and making things free. But the affordability is resonating. What if you're a Republican strategist or you're a politician that wants to be successful, you have a year.
Yep.
How do you make things more affordable? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, Trump said the word affordability is a scam. It is funny because it feels like a word that a political consultant would have come up with, and yet people evidently are really resonating with that word. But the bottom line is it is about the economics and the economic messaging. And a lot of people are stage one thinkers, as Thomas Sowell put. They hear the word free and they think, oh, great, my life is going to be better. But the reality is those policies, obviously, socialist policies don't lead to life improving. Republican policies do. And there was an interesting report last night that in Republican states, gas prices are far lower than Democratic states. So that's a great messaging issue, right? We can make gas prices cheaper. Highlight those facts because Republican policies lead to more affordability. They lead to more supply, which of course brings cost down. So I think it's just a matter of saying, look, we can point to the fact that our policies work and just hitting that again and again.
But the president's handling this. He's frustrated because he sees most of the stuff he's doing is for the economy, and he's got low ratings right now in the economy. But the most fixable area, I think, are his ratings on the economy, especially when the big beautiful bill kicks in. But the president, remember during the pandemic, I think one of his weaknesses was he was trying to will the virus away.
Yeah.
He's like, don't worry about it. Get back to work. Let's open up the schools. And people say, well, I'm not sure you should do that. Next thing you know, Mike Pence took over. The same thing. He's trying to will the economy away. Here's what he said. Cut 41.
There's this fake narrative that the Democrats talk about, affordability. They just say the word. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. You just say it. Affordability. I inherited the worst inflation in history. There was no affordability. Nobody could afford anything. The word affordability is a con job by the Democrats.
So is there a risk, Lydia, do you think, of the president, if people who live paycheck to paycheck are finding it harder to get everything on their list when they go grocery shopping? Is there a list of sounding detached?
Yeah, I don't think that denying people's reality is ever a smart political strategy. I think people do feel, I mean, you look at consumer sentiment, people aren't happy with the economics. So I think the reality is you should acknowledge that people are feeling that way because you're not going to talk them out of their feelings, and then talk about how your policies actually have made life more affordable. And there are things you can point to, again, like gas prices, and say, this is what we've done so far. I know it still feels like you're being pinched. I know it still feels like we're living paycheck to paycheck. Here's what we've accomplished, and here's what our policies will continue to accomplish.
How do you feel about the Trump dollars for kids born? They're getting $1,000, and then you have the Michael Dell come in and say, we're going to give every kid $250. They're going to be able to access it when they're 18, but make them feel a part of the economy. Make them feel, maybe incentivize parents to have more kids.
Yeah.
Do you think this is good, financial sense?
I wish I had a Trump account.
Yes.
Look, I actually think it's a really clever and new idea to teach people financial literacy. And again, you're not just handing out a check for $250 to everyone. You're kind of teaching them the value of compounded interest, of investing, of putting money aside. And so I think this is going to give people a stake in the game. And I think there has been this alarming sentiment, especially among young people who feel disenfranchised, that socialism is the answer. Well, clearly you're not going to have a free market in socialism that has these kinds of returns. And so I think giving people a stake in the stock market is key, because that's been another attack against Trump, as people say, sure, the stock market is going up, but that's only for the rich. Only the rich people have an interest in the stock market. Well, if you give everyone an interest in the stock market, they're going to pay attention to that, and they're going to see that as a positive sign for their own economic well-being. It's
so interesting is that we had the deputy Treasury Secretary on Fox and Friends today, and they are now having a conference, and they're trying to get pushback, and don't use the word capitalism. It's evidently not a great buzzword, but economic freedom might be a better line to use, but they want to start selling it. And these are some of the things that emerge from that. They want to give people a sense they're part of the economy. They want to try to give people some financial literacy, because we learn almost nothing in school, as you know. When people have a stake in the system, they say they don't want to bring down the system. This is my piece of the American dream. They'll say, that's my $1,000, and now I got $250. My sense is that Trump knows other rich people that are saying to themselves, I want to find a way to give. And I think with some of those people that come to his dinners, they might want to be a part of it, because now we know the figure of $6 billion can get another $250 in there. Next thing you know, you have a generation growing up where they feel as though they're building something.
Exactly. And I think...
And those parents do.
I mean, it's tragic for this generation that they followed this narrative of go to college, they ended up taking out a lot of debt, and they feel in this position where they can't have the American dream, where they can't ever pay off the debt, where they can't get a house. And so I think the idea that you're working towards something, and if you continue to work hard and to do the right things, that you will have this promise of having that kind of cash where you can make a down payment on the home. I think that could be truly transformative, and something's got to give, because again, you look, an overwhelming number of young people at this point are sort of lured in by socialism. And so I think you do need to make some sort of dramatic change to sell people on the free market.
Yeah, I think so, because we just thought it was assumed that people would understand our economic system. But now you have a generation growing up that says, you know what, it's just not fair. I wouldn't mind free buses. I wouldn't mind to raise taxes on rich people. I wouldn't mind my rent being frozen, but you can't play that out to see the ripple effects of that. But that's how this guy won. Mamdani won.
Right. No, and I think to your point, financial literacy isn't just learning, this is the NASDAQ, this is what an equity is. It's learning economics and what the end result is of these policies. That's hopefully a big part of the financial literacy, that when you make everything free, actually it doesn't work out because people don't have an interest in the system. You can't make buses just free. That means the people paying the taxes are going to leave, right? So I hopefully there's an element of literacy that's taught, as people are getting these accounts. And I think that's something, Trump's obviously working to sort of transform the education system. I think that could be a key thing that's added as well. Get rid of the critical race theory and add in some economics.
All right. So Lydia Moynihan here. Your latest article is about, one of your latest is former Speaker Nancy Pelosi's stock trades have launched a multi-million-dollar company. So we know this. Now she's more open to limiting trading among lawmakers now that she's leaving. She was questioned about this on 60 Minutes, I think 10 years ago, and she was offended by it wasn't Scott Pelley, it was Steve Kroft, of going to a press conference and going through. What have you discovered?
Yeah, it's always easy to try and pull the ladder up when you're on the way out. I'm a little skeptical. I know there's now another push where it seems like maybe this legislation could pass. At the end of the day, Congress is, so rarely incentivized to actually legislate themselves and to diminish their own powers. So I'm skeptical it's going to pass. But let's see. Maybe she can get it done in her final few months here in Congress.
What do you see as Pelosi's made a ton of money? What have you discovered?
Well, it is funny, too. And when she's asked about it, suddenly she becomes the biggest advocate for the free market. A few years ago during COVID, when it was revealed that she's made millions, she's basically said, it's the free market. It's a great thing. So I'd love to hear some more messaging about why the free market is good from the Democrats. We don't. But the problem with Pelosi in particular is that it's not just that she's making money from stock trades. Of course, I do need to note she always says it's her husband. But she's making money from the companies that she is in charge of regulating, essentially. So, for example, when the CHIPS Act came out, she'd already bought NVIDIA, right? So she has access to understand what kind of legislation is going to be coming down the pike and how she can benefit from that. She sold a lot of her big tech stocks right before the DOJ announced a lawsuit against Google. So clearly she has a lot of insight as former speaker as to what's happening in DC and what the implications of those policies will be on these companies. And we see she's making those strategic trades before that kind of knowledge is apparent to the rest of the public.
I mean, the president, for the most part, I remember George W. Bush put all his stuff into a trust. He had no idea where my investments are. That's not going to be up to me. Trump's a little different. He says, I'm not involved with my company, but he has his son's doing things, was able to, could his son have picked up the phone and said, hey, Dad, what's going on with Saudi Arabia? Are they going to be doing an investment here? I'm not sure. But I also know that they were very frustrated the first time because Don in particular was in charge of international deals. And they basically said to him, ethics-wise, don't do any. So he said, what am I going to do?
I think,
and now they're pushing the envelope.
One distinction that I would make is, I think the frustration that a lot of Americans have is the people who go into Congress with no money and leave super rich. I think Donald Trump's a little different. He was already a billionaire.
Yeah.
And he's still rich.
He lost money the first
term. So I think that feels a little icky to me as people who go into public service sort of with the intent, it would seem, to make money.
So just lastly, before I let you go, and let you go back to your life at the New York Post, which is glorious and glamorous.
Oh, I understand. I've never heard a newspaper described as glamorous, but I will take it. I hear
it's a wild newsroom you guys have. I will not.
Gotta come visit.
I've never really been
10th
invited.
10th floor.
Yes, 10th floor?
Yeah.
Will my past work there?
It will not. I know this because
you can't get through here?
Fox, yes, and Fox has a really great cafeteria. And we're all so jealous because we don't get access to it.
Really?
Yeah, you get these great salads for like $8.
But you know so many people, you can't throw somebody's name around.
That's true.
Aren't you on with Jesse?
Well, maybe I'll name drop you next time.
Right, I think it gets a lot of pull in the cafeteria.
Ryan said I could get a salad.
Right, I'll be quick. I won't cause any trouble. But with Mondami coming into office now, I think every day is going to be newsworthy. My hope is he's going to realize a lot of things he's saying don't make financial sense. He's not going to have the money to do anything if he implies this. And at one point, he's going to have to step back and realize how the financial sector fuels everything else he wants to do. From what you have picked up, does he have the ability and willingness to understand a lot of his policies will not fly in this country?
I can't prognosticate on his sort of inner workings, but it is noteworthy after he met with Trump. There's been a couple posts about how he actually wants to deregulate small business. That's one thing he's begun talking a bit about on social media. So I would like to see more of that. You know, hope springs. Hopefully once he gets in there and kind of sees how the world works, maybe he'll change his tune. And it's been funny as well. He's come under criticism because, you know, he wants everything to be free. And then he's been posting all these videos asking people for money because he, of course, needs money to continue to
Leslie, do you see on this Venezuela thing the same type of distraction as the Russia hoax, the Epstein files, when they're talking about double hitting a racing boat full of drugs?
I've just been shocked. It's wall-to-wall coverage. I mean, you would think this is Watergate.
Right.
It's gotten unending attention, and I think it was kind of upsetting to see just the media just leaped on this Washington Post report. There were so many questions. Now the New York Times has essentially debunked it. But I think it kind of feels like selective outrage because when Obama or Biden drone striked, we're talking American citizens, civilians. There were weddings that got drone. There were horrible things that happened, and it didn't get any attention in the media. You know, John Kirby go out there and say, "Oh, we're learning from our mistakes," and people were like, "Okay, that sounds great. Let's move on." So it is just complete selective outrage that was not a problem, but now drone striking drug boats is.
Lydia Moynihan, thanks so much. I couldn't agree more. Karl Rove joins us now, former Deputy Chief of Staff, Senior Advisor to President George W. Bush, Fox News contributor. Karl, what is your takeaway from yesterday's special election, which was, I think, a 9-point win for the Republican?
Well, 9-point win, so good. A poll had shown it as close as 2, the Emerson poll, which turned out to be inaccurate. The earlier poll showed it to be about 10 points, and that's where it sort of ended up, 9-point victory. But that ain't good because President Trump carried the district by 22 points, and Congressman Mark Green, who resigned, was reelected last fall by 21. So there's a 12 to 13 point shift among the Republican vote, and it's in every one of the counties. I mean, there are 13 counties in the district. One of them, Davison, which is the city of Nashville, is liberal, and the part of Nashville that's in this district is overwhelmingly liberal and or black or both. But all 13 counties moved to the Democrats, moved towards the Democratic side. Now, granted, the Republicans won all but one of them. They won 12 of 13, but they won them by slimmer margins. Now, what does that mean? Well, what it means is, some people say, well, the Democrats were more, energized. Well, yeah, they are, but they're going to continue to be more energized. Well, the question is, how do the Republicans get energized? Some people say, well, we're going to solve that problem by having a better get-out-the-vote operation. Well, I bet you the Republican get-out-the-vote operation was far above, in terms of resources and attention, than we're going to have in the average race next fall. And remember, there are 35 House Republicans who won by less than the swing that we saw in this district. That is to say, they won by less than 12 to 13 points. So we better wake up and realize that this is going to continue in the fall. She was not a good candidate. I mean, the Democrat was not a good candidate. The Republican was. Mat Van Epps, everybody says, was attractive, energetic, hard worker, well-respected, saying the right things.
Veteran.
And she was saying the wrong thing. But it's going to be a problem in the fall if we don't take some good lessons out of this.
So Ken Martin, who decided to pour money into this, meanwhile, I think they were basically out of money. Word is they had to do a line of credit to finance the New Jersey and Virginia races last month. But here's Ken Martin yesterday, cut 16.
In every election that's been on the ballot this year in 2025, Democrats have overperformed in red districts, in blue districts, in purple districts, all throughout this country. In fact, last November's elections were the most historic off-year elections for the Democratic Party in our party's history. And we are overperforming at an average pace of about 16%.
Is he right?
Well, no, he's not right. I mean, he is right in that the Democrats have been overperforming. They've been doing better than expected. Now, part of that is that we have Virginia and New Jersey as the biggest off-year elections. And typically what happens is, with one exception in the recent history of Virginia, whoever wins the White House loses the Virginia governor's race. And similarly, New Jersey is a Democratic state, blue state, and so you're expected to win. But yes, the Democrats are doing better than we want them to do, and they're feeling their oats, and it's helping them. And we're seeing it reflected in, for example, the fundraising for the Democratic congressional and senatorial campaign committees. They're up. Starting in the summer, they began to muscle up, and that's because Democrats are feeling more bullish about next year's midterm election.
Here's what Chris Christie, who's been a big critic of President Trump, he says it has to happen for Republicans to have success in the midterms.
Look, I think he's got a very tough choice to make. He's got to get out there himself. He's got to get out there, not sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office. He's got to get back out into the country and make the argument. He is always best when people see him out there up close. That's better for him. They feel the excitement.
And, they went on to say that, too, he gets an idea of what people think by the applause lines, by people's reaction when he brings up policies. And he hasn't been able to do that because he's running the country. Is he right?
Well, I have mixed opinions about this. I understand, yes, the president has the biggest megaphone. And so when you put him out there in campaign rallies around the country, he's going to dominate the media coverage. But on the other hand, he's also the president. And you've got a quandary you're in. The Democrats want the election to be about Trump. The president should not want it to be about Trump. He should make it about things that Republicans are out there saying and doing that show that they're in tune with what America needs, and that they are contrasting in a very strong fashion with what the Democrats have been advocating. And so I'm of the mind you want the president out there as president in a midterm election. You want him out there less as a candidate or a candidate advocate. Yes, he can do the town hall meeting, telephone hall meeting, but to put him on the road is a very dangerous and risky thing because it makes it all about the president. That's exactly what the Democrats want. And if the election is like any midterm election except the midterm election in 98 and 2002, that is to say the White House party loses seats, the president is going to get the blame for it, and it could accelerate his lame duck status for the last couple of years of his term. So
but most of the policies,
tough decision to make.
But the policies are coming from the White House, where the last administration, the new Green Deal and all that stuff, that was coming from Congress. Most of the policies are coming from the White House, right? So maybe he's the best to talk about it.
I slightly disagree. Last time around, the policies were coming from Biden, and they weren't working. That was, when he said Bidenomics is working, nobody felt that. So, but yes, you want the president out there talking about things that Americans think will make a better impact in their lives, will improve their community, improve their family, improve their own personal prosperity. But I think that's more powerful coming as a president than a partisan. And look, it's a difficult balancing act, and I grant that. But I'm thinking back 2002, we put the president out there a lot on behalf of Republican candidates because he was very popular and he was able to talk about things that people were caring about. We did not do that in 2026. Yes, we put him out there to raise money for candidates. I mean, in 2006. We did not put him out there to be the voice of the campaign. We wanted individual members to be able to say, I'm running for Congress because I care deeply about X, and I'm going to convince you that it's worthy to vote for me because there's a deep difference on the issue of X between me and my Democratic opponent. And we nearly pulled it off. And it was only the emergence of a scandal in September. Rahm Emanuel was chairman of the Democratic House Campaign Committee, and he knew for over a year that there was a Republican congressman who was making inappropriate sexual advances to young interns, male interns, and he popped it out in September of 2026. All the polls showed we were coming back, that we had a chance to hold on to the House, and that just took the bottom out of us in the middle of September. But the reason we were in reasonably good shape was members were out there making it about them and their agenda and supporting things that were important to the country, and the president was being the president.
So real quick on the economy, I think that they feel as though with the big, beautiful bill kicking in with the tax, they're going to be record returns for individuals and the no taxes on tips and the tax breaks for seniors when it comes to Social Security. there's going to be, and with gas coming down to $3, and they're already adjusting some of the tariffs in Central and South America for further grocery items, mostly fruit, they feel as though the people are going to start feeling positively about the economy. Are they being overly optimistic or right on the money?
Well, we'll see. You left out one of the most important retreats on the tariff issue, coffee. There's not enough coffee being grown in Hawaii to satisfy our needs. So the reduction of the tariff there is going to have an impact on everybody's morning. But the key thing is yes, that's what they're betting on, is that people are going to feel better. So the point is, don't overemphasize it. Don't under-promise and over-deliver. One of the key mistakes that Biden made was to say Bidenomics is working when people didn't feel it was, and then when inflation began to moderate in late 2024 and 2023 and into 2024, people were beyond believing anything that the administration said. So the tone, I think the Secretary of the Treasury has been really good in his tone to say we're on the right course. We know it's going to be difficult to get to where we need to go, but we're doing the right thing, and it's going to make a difference in people's lives. And emphasize what they're doing and say we're working on making this come to pass so it affects your life, your family, your job, your community, rather than saying, oh, everything's great, we got it handled. People just don't believe that, obviously. That's why the president's numbers are so low on the economy, and why, until people begin to believe that it's having an effect, don't overemphasize the strength of it. Say it's going to work. We're going to stay at it. We're going to every day. We're going to be doing things to make your life better, and we'll get through this together. Don't say it's all handled. Don't worry about it.
So Ukraine and Russia, I just want to get your opinion. Yuri Yashkov, the Putin foreign policy advisor, in the meeting yesterday after 5 hours said this, cut 21.
So far, a compromise hasn't been found. Some of the American proposals seem more or less acceptable, but they need to be discussed. Some of the wording that was proposed to us doesn't suit us, so the work will continue.
And Vladimir Putin said, I didn't like Europe. He says the Europeans are trying to screw up the deal. We know that the Ukrainians working really hard with us to come up with something, knocked it down to 19 points. So do you think Putin's playing games with us, or do you think there's do you think that he feels pressure to come to the table? What's your gut tell you?
Well, my gut tells me that he thinks that he can pull this off. Think about what he said 2 days ago. We're ready to have war with Europe.
Yep.
Talk about a thug. Talk about a bully. He's trying to say, give me everything I want, or I'm going to threaten you to do to you what I've been doing to Ukraine. And the only thing that a bully understands is being popped in the nose. So we ought to say, in my opinion, we've given you a good arrangement. It's acceptable to Ukrainians. It ought to be acceptable to you. And if it's not, we're going to hold you responsible, Putin. And we're gonna make it possible for the Ukrainians to do even more. You want to keep this thing going? Great. We, the Europeans and the United States together, will make certain that Ukraine has what it takes in the way of armaments, munitions, and supplies to get done the job.
No doubt about it. I think, say, Tomahawks and more Patriots are coming. That would be great. Vladimir Putin says a compromise is unlikely. And he also says, he came out and said, if Europe suddenly wants to wage a war with us and starts it, we're ready to fight. I have news for you. He said something similar in 24. Nothing happened. Number two is that he can't handle one country. He's going to handle 27.
Yeah. Well, and look what's happening. The Germans just passed a budget with an historic commitment to their national defense, and they're not alone. Poland will shortly have the second largest army in Europe after Ukraine. And, you look at what's happening in Great Britain and in Belgium and in Netherlands and, France and, about the Spaniards are about the only ones that are out of this. The rest of Europe says we face a grave threat from the east, from Russia, and we have to be ready. And that means that we need to start taking care of our own national defense rather than simply relying upon NATO. Yes, they want NATO, but they also understand they need to meet their obligations as well.
I know, but wouldn't it be interesting if they just stopped buying? Wouldn't it be better if they just stopped buying all oil and gas from Russia? They have not done that yet. How maddening is that, Karl Rove?
Well, it is, but they are working on it, and part of that is our problem too. Because remember, the Biden administration crimped our ability to move forward and fast on creating facilities to take American natural gas and send it to Europe. And what the irony is that we can do that in a competitive fashion with Russia, that it simply puts the gas in a pipeline and sends it to Europe. So it's we've got to play some catch up. Right now, the people who are sort of benefiting from this are the people in the Middle East, like Qatar and other countries that have significant gas reserves and are selling them to the Europeans. But the U.S. can do so as well, and we will be competitive in price.
Yep, and put pressure on India to knock it off and say we'll be your new supplier. Karl Rove, thanks so much.
All the best. Thanks.
You got it.